Who am I? That's what I want to talk about. Not necessarily who am I specifically, but who are you? And who is that individual who is struggling against mental illness or schizophrenia? And I made a video uh, talking about how to recover from schizophrenia, and I believe I said the first step is to recognize the illness, right? And I do believe that that is the first step in recovery. Um, is lasting recovery is that you have to recognize that you're ill. If you don't recognize that there's a problem going on, you're not going to take the steps in order to be well or to continue to be well. So have to recognize the illness, but then there's also even in the midst of the illness itself, right? It is okay. Well, you have to recognize your identity as well, right? And this is important in so many ways. For one, it's more important even when you are in the midst of uh, collapse. If you're in the midst of being attacked, um, it's easy to recognize yourself when you are clearly identifiable, right? Meaning that there's no pressure on the mind. The the delusions, the hallucinations, and these things are suppressed. But that's good. But it's even more imperative to have this awareness uh, in the midst of all that turmoil, because this will allow the individual to move through that kind of onslaught and come out still facing the right direction. And it's important to know yourself and to not identify yourself with the illness, and that's what I think a lot the mistake a lot of people do is the mistake a lot of medical professionals do. And it's because we've got to separate me from schizophrenia, me from the delusions, me from the hallucinations. Therefore, it's never my schizophrenia, it's never my hallucinations, never my delusions. It's always the delusions, the illness. Um, you know, because if I'm trying to get back to the point where I was not suffering from mental illness, then before that, before the illness, it was never my hallucinations. It's never my delusions, unless we now see the illness itself as a part of us and our identity, right? We cannot expect anyone else to see us um, and not the illness if we ourselves don't even recognize ourselves outside of the illness. If we ourselves do not identify ourselves beyond the illness, but if we identify ourselves and claim my schizophrenia, my hallucinations, my delusions, well, how can we expect anyone else to see to not to see me and not see the illness? You see what I'm saying? So we have to first um, live up to our own expectations. We have to first recognize ourselves as who we want to be before we can even have the expectation of somebody else to recognize us how we want to be identified. And so I think it's very, so I think recognizing self, and when I was just going through my situation there, it was so hard for me to be, at the surface, if you understand what that means, because I was so trapped like back here, and it's like I was felt like I was a fly caught in the spider's web, or like I was submerged underwater, and I had to fight to get back to the surface because I literally was not at the forefront of myself, and I had to struggle to get back. It was literal. It was a fight, and it's just an idea of how the illness tries to steal our identity, and it tries to get us to identify ourselves with it, because in a sense it was at the forefront of who I was. It was the thing that was interacting with the world, and I was just in the back seat, just along for the ride. And but I had to learn to speak properly. I had to learn to think properly, and to fight for that, and to recognize who I was, and what it was, and that we're not the same. I cannot identify myself with something that I do not want. I do not identify myself with something that is out to destroy me and to take my life. That would be a great mistake on my part. And again, we cannot hope and cannot expect anyone else to recognize us when we aren't even meeting our own expectation of them. I think that's unfair. And so it only makes sense that we recognize ourselves, ask ourselves who we are, and if we see ourselves as something that's outside of the illness or separate from it, then we must speak like it, and we must think like it, and that gives us the direction where we want to go, and we walk in that direction, and we keep on speaking that truth, and believing it, and keep walking towards it until it manifests. And it will, because there's a law there's a law control in that. And maybe I'll talk about that another time. But recognizing the self, who am I? And answer that question. And if you can recognize yourself beyond your illness, then I think you make some progress, and that's a good place to be. A lot of people can't do that, find it very difficult. And yeah, so that's it for this video. Thank you, and later.